Why do we cook? We cook for food, for family, and for friends. We cook to bring people together.
Honey, that looks good. Pardon my fork.
Hello and welcome to Pardon My Fork. This is Andy, and we have an episode for you today that it was a little off the cuff. It literally was just myself and Chef Kevin Getline sitting around the entire day cooking, eating, drinking, just having a really good time. And at a certain point, I decided that we needed to heat the mics up and do a little talking. We may have gone a bit overboard, so this is a long one, you guys. I will warn you up front, but we had a lot of fun doing it, and I had a lot of fun listening back to it, and I think you guys are too. So please enjoy our, well, what do you want to call them? Inane ramblings during a day of nothing but cooking and eating. Chef Kevin, who I'm pouring a little Bushmills Red Bush for right now, is a longtime friend of mine. He's a car guy, and that's actually how I know him. We've known each other in the the car world for a while. Yeah. But you know what? We're really connecting in the food world, aren't we, buddy?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, clearly you've been friends with me longer than I've been friends with you, unfortunately. But yeah, no, it's been spectacular reconnecting with you over food as well. Because, you know, as I've grown up and matured a little bit, cars have, you know, taken kind of a back seat to the rest of my life because they're so damn expensive, and I don't live at home anymore, and I have to pay rent and bills and all that other stuff like, you know, adults do. But food is something that we have to do anyway. You know, I gotta eat. Everybody's got to eat. So.
How funny is it that food kind of is the surrogate for the cars? I know so many car people that are into food, into barbecue specifically. It's almost like you get to keep using your hands doing it, and that's the important part about cars. Like, we all like driving, we all like cars. I like the motorization of things, but at the same time, there's something that I just like about being able to use my hands that really counts, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you start with, you know, you've got a product you begin with, and the object with, in my opinion, with cars and with food is to end up with something better than what you started with, right? Or at least more fun.
It's so arrogant with cars, though, because you think that you're going to be able to do something, improve upon these automotive engineers.
Well, that's the thing. That's why I think I ended up going to food from cars, is because like 99% of the time, anytime I got my hands on a car and tried to, air quote, make it better, I ended up ruining it. So it's taken, food's a little easier. And even if you do ruin food, it's, you know, like, oh no, I burned a $20 steak. It's not like, oh crap, I just, you know, stuffed a $6,000 car into a wall because I thought I improved the suspension when really I just made it terrible.
This is true. This is a good point. And, you know, I think that the whole car improvement thing, there's a certain amount of that happens with food. It's not exactly the same, but, you know, people that think they can take a barbecue and make all these improvements with it over and beyond what, like, the engineers did, right? Yeah. So you and I were talking about my old Oklahoma Joe, and I've got a charcoal basket, and I extended the smokestack, and those things drastically increase the performance of the Oklahoma Joe. And it's not anything against the engineers that created it, but I think they're going for a specific thing, and there's something else that I want, right?
Sure. I mean, that makes total sense. Like, how is extending that stack on the Oklahoma Joe any different from adding a catback exhaust?
That's, you know what, that's a good point. A catback exhaust is going to increase flow and sound good and performance and all that.
Sure.
And then putting the extended exhaust stack on the Oklahoma Joe is going to increase the velocity of your air going out, which increases the air coming in.
Exactly.
And so it'll let you run a higher temperature inside, make it more efficient.
But the biggest difference, Andy, is about $400, I feel like.
Yeah, because that extension on the Oklahoma Joe was $10.
Yeah, whereas a catback like HKS for, you know, whatever, got to be at least for, I mean, it's been a while since I've been in the car parts game as far as like that kind of aftermarket stuff goes, but can't imagine finding anything for less than $500.
And you know what? There's even more crossover there because, like the charcoal basket, I made myself because I've got a welder and a bandsaw and grinder and stuff like that. I got a a shop here at the house, and the stack I was able to make because I was able to weld on another, piece of all thread inside and thread a nut on, and now I've got the cap on it and stuff like that to use as damper.
Right.
And so there's a lot of crossover there as well, don't you think?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, really, I think what it boils down to is moving from cars to food. Is that, as much as I hate to admit it, Andy, we're getting older. We're not exactly spring chickens anymore. And my interests have just changed. Yeah, I still like cars. Mm-hmm. I still enjoy driving fast. But, man, I really like eating.
Well, but you also have a culinary degree. That's the thing.
Yeah, that's true. This is true.
What prompted you to get a culinary degree?
Oh, man. So I watched a lot of Food Network when it when it was first like kind of making its big splash, right? This is in like maybe the early 2000s, like 2000, 2001. I was watching a lot of cooking shows, and
let's be realistic though, who wasn't?
Well, so I had just started smoking weed. This was like just in high school, right? And I'm not affiliated with any restaurant anymore, so I feel like I can talk about this openly.
Sure, yeah.
And I mean, what's like the one thing that everybody talks about when you get stoned is getting the munchies, right?
Right.
So like watching cooking shows and getting stoned went hand in hand, and it's only a matter of time until, they're going to intersect, and you're going to decide watching the cooking show's not enough. Like, I want to make some of this stuff, right? So I was just experimenting around, and, I was going to school less and less, and my family's like, look, if you're going to do what you're doing, you need to at least get a job, right? So I'm like, okay, I need to get a job. I like cooking. So I opened the classified ads, because this is before the internet was really a thing, 2002, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
it was like
yeah.
17. And just happened upon a prep cook position with no experience required and will train, and I just kind of jumped on it, and it's been it was a 16-year torrid love affair with food. And I mean, it still really is. It's still something I'm really passionate about. It's something I really enjoy, not just in execution, but in talking about. It's something I can talk about with just about anybody. It's like, doesn't matter where in the world you're from, like, I'll know something about your culture's food, or at least it's highly likely. So, I mean...
And not everybody gets to do exactly what they were meant to do, but I do feel like food is right up there for you, because your ability to remember exactly what these foods are and what they're called and all that stuff, you can recall it off the top of your head. And that's certainly not something I can do. I know what a bechamel is, and I know what I wanted to say something else, but now I don't remember the other thing. That's what I'm talking about. You have a natural aptitude for it is the thing.
Right. And I mean, a certain amount of cooking is talent. A lot of it you can train. You can train your palate to taste certain things, or if somebody tells you this is how something should taste, like it needs to have this balance between acidity and sugar or whatever. Like you can teach all of that stuff, but like the things you can't teach, are really where I feel like sets like real good chefs apart from the others.
I gotta be honest with you, man. That's why I lean on my wife, Corianne, so much.
Oh, she's got such a great palate.
That palate, dude.
Yeah. And it's funny because she doesn't even necessarily know it. Like, I guarantee you in there, before she asked me what that soup needed, she knew it needed
Yeah.
something. She didn't necessarily know what it was, but her palate was able to pick up. It's like, this isn't quite right. Otherwise, I don't think she would have asked.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can tell with like the coleslaw and the squash and stuff. So last weekend we had Chef Casey Gonzalez, who's been on the show before. I forget what the episode number is, but I'll post a link underneath this episode. But, after he left, he just sent me a text a couple of days later, and he was like, thank you for the hospitality, all that. By the way, your wife can cook. She can get it. And by the way, if she ever needs another job, I will hire her in any one of my restaurants.
Oh, that's high praise.
That is very high praise. Yeah. But it is the praise that I expect for someone of her caliber. She just really is able to cook and not even realize it.
Yeah, and that's again part of that natural talent,
right.
Like she just knows, like, and the rest you can train, like realizing that there's something missing is something you can't train. Train how to fix stuff. Like you can tell it's like, oh, this tastes like this, it needs more of this, right? But understanding and being able to discern that something's missing, is really her ability to do that is just really impressive.
I feel like I've learned being around her, especially with like wine tasting and things like that, because I listen to her and I see what she's tasting and I try to kind of keep a mental log of it, And the other thing I've noticed is that a lot of chefs are well traveled. And they have these sights and smells and sounds and experiences that are attached to the taste. You know what they say? The olfactories are the most tied to your memories, right?
100%.
Right. A visual thing won't always trigger a memory, but a smell almost always will trigger a memory if there's a memory there.
Absolutely. Like, I couldn't tell you what color my first girlfriend's eyes were, but I definitely remember the smell of her perfume.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm that way with barbecue in a lot of ways because I don't necessarily know what exactly I'm tasting, but I know if it tastes like what I want it to taste like. And a lot of times I know what the smoker smells like, whether or not it's running the way I want it to.
Right.
The color of the smoke, though, we did a lot of that today. We would add wood. I'll be real honest with you guys, because we've just been hanging out and smoking cigars and drinking fine wines and stuff like that. And so I've kind of let the smoker go, but we've had it go out a few times. I did get it right back, and it got that puff of the heavy smoke, because that's what happens when you're starting a fire. You get a lot of smoke and then it heats up and then you don't have as much smoke. But watching the smoke color coming out of the stack is something that can be trained. It's a very experiential thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just having the knowledge too, and knowing it's like, oh, the smoke is this color, it's thicker, it's more acrid. Like, again, just having that knowledge really helps. It was a great day to be able to see the smoke too. It's nice and cold.
Oh yeah, so it's been raining all day.
You can really see the difference. Like, I mean, you can almost watch it change, like minute to minute. It was really cool. I do feel like that the pork is going to be fantastic. I know it is, but I feel like that even just those couple of runs of heavy smoke might have bittered that skin. Because that piece of skin I had was real tasty, but now, like, after it's been a few minutes, I've got that lingering kind of acrid, ultra smoke taste in my mouth that's not exactly pleasant.
So the one thing I did with this pork shoulder is I left the skin on. I scored it. They're like inch by inch cubes. And I don't know, man, this might have been the right time for me to do that because we've been so lackadaisical about keeping the smoker burning. Maybe that skin has acted like a buffer, no?
I mean, it has to have had, it has to have acted like a buffer. It's got that nice thick layer around the outside. You've got a little bit of the meat exposed from your cuts.
Yeah.
But it absolutely soaked up a lot of that extra smoke, for sure. I don't think necessarily it would have been a big issue, just because you would have been able to incorporate that extra smoky layer in with the rest of the pork. It could have, it'll get diluted quite a bit.
Sure.
The problem with that skin, though, is that there's no way to, like, cut that stuff up. It's still, like, although it is crisp and crunchy, it's not like that glass shattering skin. So I think, like, again, next time maybe, maybe remove the skin, but smoke the skin alongside the pork just lightly before dehydrating and then frying. And I think try and go with like a light smoked chicharron or deep fried pork rind.
It's funny because that was originally my plan. That's the whole reason why I saved all of the skins off of the pork shoulders that I cooked for people last weekend.
So you have just a bunch of pork skins laying around still?
A gallon bag stuffed full of pork skins.
My man, yeah, absolutely. I'd say give them a light smoke.
Because me, waste not, want not, I guess is really kind of what I boil down to, but I just don't like throwing things away. I just don't. And it comes to anything. It comes to leftovers. It comes to food that's kind of past. It's like lettuce that's past its day, starting to brown and stuff. Like, I always want to use it. You can't always use it, but I don't like food waste. I don't think any chef likes food waste.
No, I mean, food waste is your biggest enemy.
Sure, it's your largest, from a strictly business standpoint, it can be what makes or breaks a lot of restaurants.
Yeah, and being able to utilize what other people would deem as waste, that's just money in your pocket.
Right.
So,
oh, and we have to take a little step back. Kevin knows barbecue. You spent some time in a barbecue restaurant in California, right?
Yeah, it was the Smoking Pig barbecue in San Jose.
Michelin recommended.
Correct, yes.
And you know what's funny? Going back to cars, we were talking about this earlier today. When people are talking about tires, they say Michelin. When they're talking about the stars for the restaurant, they say Michelin.
Yeah, you got to put the French accent on it if it's food related.
It's so pretentious.
Yeah, it really is. Like, I can feel my nose curling up every time I say it.
Yeah, you spent how long? What did you say? 3 years
at Smoking Pig? I was like a year and a half.
Oh, year and a half.
Year and a half. Yeah. It was primarily a job that I took while my hand was healing, because it was fairly easy. There's a decent amount of butchery, obviously, but like it was all pretty light. Just manipulating brisket and ribs, essentially. Pork shoulders don't need a whole lot of attention, but trimming brisket and trimming ribs.
What was going on with your hand?
Oh, so I had a minor little work injury where a pocket knife that was attached to a set of keys got tossed to me and impaled my hand.
I remember that.
Yeah, I was out of work for about 9 months and eventually, just had to get back in and take something.
Yeah.
I actually took 2 jobs. I was working at Smoking Pig as their pit master, or like lead smoker or whatever you want to call it. I worked there in the mornings, and then in the evenings I would go next door and cashier and cook pizzas at Mod Pizza.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're probably not going to be too hurt by the idea of me doing a wood-fired pizza oven at the house.
Oh no, wood-fired pizza is fantastic. Yeah. Mod Pizza is an absolute joke, though. I mean, not to talk trash about anybody or anything, but like, working there was a joke, I should say. It's a great concept. The food is, I'll say, decent. Sure. It's not terrible. There's definitely worse pizza out there. But I mean, for me, after working in the restaurant industry for at that point, like 14 years, having my job duties be stocking napkin dispensers and opening cans of tomato sauce, it was really humbling. I'll say.
Yeah.
But again, living in the Bay Area, it's like, yeah, I had a good job at a Michelin barbecue restaurant, and still had to pick up shifts somewhere else because it was so expensive to just live there. Like, working 80 hours a week. Well, to live in an Airbnb.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, where are you at in life then? I mean, do you find yourself wanting to be back in a restaurant? I know you're not right now. Again, that's the whole good side of having a dual discipline, because I know you're working in the auto industry right now. But do you see yourself ending up back in a restaurant?
I mean, honestly, no. Maybe on the side for some fun.
Or maybe if it's something that you do yourself, I assume.
Maybe.
Because didn't you work as a private chef for a little while?
I did a little side gigging as a personal chef, and it was mostly for people with like dietary restrictions and stuff like that didn't want to eat, like just garbage, bland food. I got a couple of people that were like paleo, which is a couple guys that did keto, and so it was mostly, I don't even know if I'd call it like personal chef so much as just like meal prep,
Mm-hmm.
But it was elevated meal prep. It wasn't just like, I'm going to jam 3 ounces of kale into this Tupperware and do that 15 times for a 2-week or a 1-week period. Like,
sure.
We would try and like switch it up for them, make sure they were getting like different flavors and not getting bored, because these people had to stick to these diets. It wasn't like, oh, I want to lose some weight. It's like, my body can't handle certain things. I need a specialized diet. What can I do?
And we had a couple of those people at that water ski event that we catered for. We had a few people that were vegan because of health reasons. It's not that they couldn't eat meat, it's that the meat didn't react well with their bodies if they ate it constantly. So we had a few people that ended up eating our barbecue because that was like their once or twice a year that they were able to try barbecue,
Yes.
And I felt flattered that was their time, and they said, okay, this is the moment where I'm going to try it. And we did have one guy that said straight up, he just told us flat out, he's like, I eat meat once a year, and this is that time of the year, and I do not regret it. That was high praise, I felt like.
Yeah. What did you feed this guy again? I remember you telling me about
It was
this.
the pork shoulder.
Yeah, that's right.
Pulled pork.
Yeah. That's kind of your specialty, man, I think.
Well, it is, and that's actually why we're doing a full pork shoulder today, is because we didn't get any. I mean, obviously, we ate a little bit at the water ski event, but then last weekend we cooked 6 pork shoulders and some ribs just for friends. They bought the whole shoulders from me, and I'd like to do that once in a while, but I didn't actually get any of it.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm not really that good of a friend because I didn't get any of it either.
It's not that you're not a good enough friend, it's that I sold out too quick.
Yeah. It's all right. You're making it up today.
Well, I did show you the big bag of bones. I think you're going to be taking those home.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're going to do some fun stuff with that. I'm definitely thinking about doing the hamon parcier with that, but doing it like an American twist on it with some barbecue. Maybe like a barbecue mustard instead of just a straight Dijon.
Sure.
Still got to figure out some kind of herb to put in the top.
What did you call it? A hamon fume?
Hamon fume parcier.
There you go.
Yeah, smoked ham.
Did I just say a swear word, fume?
Fume, actually, like, I'm not sure. My conversational French isn't that great, but fish fume is like a fish stock almost.
Oh, okay.
Fume might even be like broth.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting close then, because you'll be boiling those down.
Yeah, true story.
Yeah, fair enough. So a hamon fume or fume. What'd you call it?
So traditionally, it's hamon parcier.
Hamon parcier. It's ham stock that's been cooked down to basically the gelatin. So a super flavorful gelatin that then has the meat incorporated, and then a layer of parsley over the top.
Yeah, it's like ultra old school. I don't know what era it would be, like maybe 60s or 70s French Nouveau cuisine with, like, everything's like aspics and gelatins and all that really fancy frou-frou.
Kind of like the 50s in the United States.
Yeah, exactly. Slightly behind the French, but yeah, 100.
Those recipes, dude, where they put everything in gelatin. I love those cookbooks.
Yeah.
I love looking through those where they take hot dogs and they blend them up with gelatin and they put them in a mold.
Oh my God. It's making me cringe right now. How did we survive the 50s?
I don't know, man. We were eating a lot of MREs.
Yeah, good point.
But I mean, there's some value to that, though, isn't there? Because you look at things like Scrapple, or obviously not Spam, but what Spam was before it was Spam. Things like that. Those are kind of lost arts. They're foods that are very good. They're a little bit poor-ish foods, I guess you might say. They're foods that were made more for their preservation rather than their taste.
Right.
But I do think that people are starting to come back around to those a little bit. I personally want to try making my own chopped ham, gelatin, formed into a loaf kind of a thing. I think that those look fascinating. I really think that...
Make some heritage Spam.
Yeah, heritage Spam. There you go.
I honestly don't know how I feel about that.
You don't know how you have to feel about it. You'll just know how you feel about it when I cut you off a slice from my loaf.
Yeah.
And I fry it with a couple of duck eggs on top.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to put it in my mouth. Like, I'm going to eat it.
Of course.
But, I mean, I don't, I kind of like Spam. Spam's got its place. Spam musubi is awesome.
And going back to Chef Casey Gonzalez, he loves Spam. We actually talked at great length about this, about the idea of making your own Spam type of food. Because, listen, it started from a place. Scrapple is a lot of the pork offcasts. It's a lot of the head meat. And it's a lot of the gelatin that has been... poured over that meat and formed into a loaf. Lots of salt, lots of curing. It's something that can sit on a shelf for a while. And, once upon a time, that was very important to us as a people.
Well, yeah, I mean, even in the 50s, refrigeration and preservation was, it's not as easy as it is today. We take a lot of this stuff for granted,
For sure.
But yeah, curing meat is the oldest way to store meat, or at least to be able to store it without getting yourself sick. I really do enjoy, and I mean, who doesn't enjoy salted meat? Like, come on.
Or preserved meat.
Yeah.
You had the, should I say, opportunity to try some of my preserved duck breasts that I made. I specifically saved a little bit of this for you. I've been hanging on to it for weeks. You know that, right?
I mean, I know when I saw you post that you made it on Facebook, and I know that there's still a little piece of it left. So, yeah, you know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist.
I have a couple of pieces right here in front of me. I'm really curious to know your thoughts, like, as you try it on air.
I mean, I've eaten quite a bit of this already today.
Yes.
And it's just to have this duck fat just melt in your mouth like butter is one of the most beautiful sensations that you can experience when eating something. Like, it's silky, it's velvety, the flavor's rich. I mean, I don't know who doesn't like duck, but if you don't, I don't trust you.
It's like people that abuse animals. You just don't trust them.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah. Like, literally, just, you can let it sit in your mouth, and in a matter of seconds, it's just rendered.
But how do we move away from something like this that is so delicious, and I would argue quite easy to make, but the normal person is not going to try to go out and make this on their own, even though it would be very worth it, because this is something that can act as a piece of meat on its own. It can act as something that is an addition to a dish. It's technically a charcuterie. So it'd be very easy to have something like this that you slice thin. You include it with like cheese and crackers. It's an appetizer, but it can easily be a meal in and of itself. And again, it's something that's so easy to make.
Well, as easy as you would call it, it still requires effort. And that's something that, I hate to say it, but a lot of people are not willing to put in. We're all about instant gratification now. And that means if you can't buy it at a store or have it easily prepared in, you know, like a day, most people don't want anything to do with it. How long did this take to cure in your fridge?
It was a week covered in salt, and then 2 weeks wrapped in cheesecloth hanging in the back of the fridge.
Right. So you bought food that you couldn't eat for 3 weeks until after you had bought it, essentially. That's a commitment that a lot of people are not willing to make.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are just, I don't know what the word is that's going to describe them without offending them, but some people just don't care. And that's fine, you know, if you don't care, that's cool. But as somebody that does care, it's a little frustrating to see people that don't.
I mean, I agree with you. People don't normally seek out something that they then have to do another 3 weeks worth of effort for. But, you know, nothing good ever comes easy, right?
I fully agree.
When you boil down cooking to the essence, that's really what it is, because all this stuff that's instant and you microwave it or you boil it or you buy the package, and all you have to do is open it. And, I mean, realistically, a lot of people would probably buy a package if they could literally just, you know, I don't know, pound on a corner of the package, let it sit for 10 minutes, and it'd be fully cooked out of the bag. They'd probably eat it.
I'm sure there's people working on something like this already right now.
Yeah. There's probably MREs that are like that or something. Yeah.
But, I mean, for me, like, it's not just about the finished result. The process is what's enjoyable to me as well, like actually preparing something.
And again, that comes back around to the whole car thing, by the way.
Yeah,
the comparison.
Sure. And, I mean, and just knowing the process, knowing that this had to sit in your fridge for 3 weeks, you know, and that you had to just sit there and stare at it every day.
Oh, that's the whole trick, though, is you don't stare at it. You put it in the very back where you're not going to see it.
Oh, like you weren't looking at it every time you opened your fridge.
Right. It was a discovery. Literally, it was a discovery when I realized that it had been 2 weeks. Like, my alarm on my phone went off, and I was like, oh, snap, I forgot that was in the back of my fridge.
You actually successfully forgot and hid it from yourself?
100%.
Well done. That's some serious discipline there. I don't think that's something I'd be able to execute. I'd be looking at it every hour.
And you know what's funny, man? I didn't know if I was wasting this duck breast or not. Big shout out to Duck Char, by the way. They sent me some duck, and then I actually bought some more of their duck after they sent me some because it was just so good. Because the first couple of breasts we cooked up as steaks. They're so good. cooked up that way. You score them in a checker pattern, very small, half an inch checker pattern for the fat, and then you grill them like a steak, and at 140, 145, they're done. They're ready to go.
Okay.
And just so ridiculously good, and I loved them so much that we got a couple more, and I just stuck them in the freezer. Didn't know what I was going to do with them. The first of the second round that we got, of course, we chopped up and made burgers. I think you saw photos of that.
I did. I was very jealous.
Those burgers were crazy good, and so rich, by the way.
Was it just duck fat that you had chopped up into it? It was all like 100% duck burger, no added pork fat or beef fat or anything like that?
Nothing. I consulted with Josh from Duck Char, and I said, are you sure I don't have to add anything else to this? And he said, nope, just do a rough chop with a chef's knife, form it into a patty, throw that thing on the grill, and man, he was not lying. It turned out so good and held together super well, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, duck does have like a really nice texture to it, even when it's like rare or mid rare.
Yeah.
So I can see it standing up to being ground or chopped roughly, like a rough grind and then grilled.
And it did. It stood up super, super well. Yeah. And then, of course, we sat on that last duck breast. I wasn't real sure what I wanted to do with it. I knew I wanted it to be something special for the show, and well, for the show and for me personally. Let's be realistic, but I didn't quite know what to do with it. And then when Corianne said, let's do a duck breast prosciutto, I ran across the recipe. I thought, man, that looks cool. And I sent it to her, and she was like, yeah, let's do it 100%. So it literally was just salt, crushed up juniper berry, a little pepper that we cured it in.
Yeah.
And then when it was time to come out of the salt bath, we brushed off the salt. Not all the salt. There was a little bit left on the outside. I didn't try to wash it off or anything, but I brushed it off for the most part. And then I just wrapped it in cheesecloth and hung it in the back of the fridge, made sure that it was hung right where the air blows down.
Yep.
And that was it. Forgot about it.
That's amazing. Yeah, it really turned out well. And I feel like, so I got the end piece, which for me is like, it's obviously, if you know anything about cured meats, it's like the best piece.
Yeah.
It's the driest. It's got the most flavor. It's fantastic.
It was easily as much fat as it was meat.
Oh yeah. The fat to meat ratio is just spot on. I mean, the first slice I took didn't even have any meat on it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That was intentional, by the way.
Yeah. I remember when you cut it, you were like, all I want is the fat to start off with.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And I'm still fully behind the idea of just making a straight duck lardo.
And actually, there's one piece left that's straight duck lardo, so that's all you, brother.
You spoil me.
I do. Did I give that to you before we even started cooking today?
Yeah, that's like, I had duck fat in my mouth no less than 10 minutes after I arrived.
At 8:30 in the morning or whatever it was.
Yeah, duck fat, and what was that whiskey you poured me?
Oh, that was a little bit of the Marcotte Copper Rabbit. It's their moonshine that they age in a 5-gallon barrel. And obviously they're not leaving it for years and years. You don't have to because it's a 5-gallon barrel. So a lot more surface area. It ages much quicker. But also what you get from that is something that's not super aged, I guess you might say. It's well enough aged. Okay. I'm stumbling over my words here. Let me put it this way. When you have a whiskey that kind of has that wood shaving, almost like a pencil shaving flavor, that's when you can tell it has not stayed on oak long enough, because that is a very young whiskey. It hasn't matured enough when it has that flavor, okay? This does not have that flavor at all. It's definitely matured enough. They leave it in that 5-gallon barrel. I don't remember what he told me. I want to say it was like 6 or 7 months. Which is the equivalent of, I think, 2 years if you're figuring a 50-gallon or 53-gallon barrel.
Okay.
But it's just their moonshine, which, that's the other thing about Marcotte. Their moonshine, it's like a really fine vodka. If you try their Silver Moon, it's just the straight moonshine.
Sure.
But it does not have the burn. It doesn't have the bite. They do such a good job of cutting the heads and tails on that.
Yeah, and you said he double distills too, right?
Yeah, and it's such a good, high-quality product. I honestly can't believe how high a quality the product is for just a flavored moonshine. But they take such detail for it. But at any rate, so he got me one of those bottles when he came and picked up one of my pork shoulders last weekend. And just this morning, I was on their Facebook page, and they said, just to let everybody know, Copper Moon is sold out. That's how fast that stuff goes.
God. And I mean, how often is this guy making runs? Like a couple times a year or once a year?
Yeah, a couple times a year.
Couple times a year. Okay. Yeah, that's wild.
Mm-hmm. When something's that good, it's just going to go fast, and you know it is.
Yeah, his was good, but what really knocked my socks off was the stuff out of that little barrel.
Oh, yeah. That's a little homebrew. Nobody's going to be able to try that. But, yeah, that stuff is hot.
Yeah, that's an eye-opener.
133 proof is what it went into the barrel at.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. I will say. Definitely woke me up.
But we're past the pencil shaving flavor. We're at like 4 months.
Yeah, and it was still, I mean, it definitely still needed some time.
Sure.
But it wasn't terrible. I mean, anything that hot, you know, you're good. I don't care who you are, you're making the whiskey face. It was almost like drinking Everclear. Like the minute it hit my tongue, it was just like volatile. It was so volatile, like it's just all up in your nose.
Yeah.
But it was really tasty.
Well, then it calms down into that rich vanilla caramel flavor, everything that you would expect from a toasted oak barrel.
Right, and basically the longer it sits in that barrel, the quicker and more strongly those flavors are going to come through. So
Right, exactly. I honestly think if we were making this stuff not just for us, but to sell or something, in a couple of months we'd probably be able to splash some water into it, bring it down to 100 proof, 90 proof, and bottle it, and it'd be ready to go. That's just my personal feeling.
Right. God, 100 proof. I'm such a big sissy with alcohol. I don't know what it is. Like, even 100 proof, for me, is, like, almost over the top.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
It's like a Knob Creek. You're not into that.
I mean, I'll drink Knob Creek, but I generally hit it with a splash of water.
Sure.
Just so I can actually taste it. Because for anything over 80 proof, for me, really, it's like I'm so overwhelmed by just the alcohol that I can't really appreciate anything else.
You have a pretty refined palate, though. That's the thing about food people, is you've kind of trained yourself to taste every little thing when you're eating something, and it's hard to turn that off.
Oh, God. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if hard is the word. I feel for me, it's like it's almost impossible.
Sure.
Yeah, which is really frustrating because for me, I don't mind. Like, if I'm cooking something for myself, it's like, oh yeah, next time I'll do this different, or like I used too much of something, or it's not quite right. Like I'm always critiquing myself, right? Again, it's just you're constantly just tasting everything. But for other people, it's really annoying because you've always got something to say. So I've learned to just, like, when somebody asks me, it's like, oh, how is it? Most of the time, I'll just be like, oh yeah, it's great, and I'll just keep the suggestions to myself. That is not the case with you, though.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, obviously, because I know you want that. I know you want the criticism.
I do, because I'm always trying to improve, and I think that anybody that does this kind of stuff, any person that takes their barbecue seriously, they're going to want the criticism. I think most people would, but it's definitely like taking a movie critic to the movies. You don't necessarily want to know their exact opinions. A generalization, an overall, an umbrella thought.
Sure. But to sit there and, like, completely pick everything apart, like,
Sure.
That's something that most people do not want.
But I welcome it. We're sitting there talking about, what was it, the riblets this morning. Actually, before we go too far into this whole thing, let's break down, because this has been quite the day, man, quite the day. I had started the smoker up at 6:30, got that pork shoulder on. You showed up, I don't know, hour and a half later. I don't even think it was 8:30 when you showed up. And honestly, that's the thing I like about having chefs over to the house, is they don't roll in at 1 o'clock. They want to be here. They want to see the whole process. So,
oh yeah. I'm a little bummed, honestly, that pork was already on when I got here. I was like, damn it, I should have left an hour early.
Next weekend.
Yeah, right? Well, I did have that little setback this morning, too, with the power going out while I was in the shower. That was exciting.
Always makes you feel like this is the day I die. This is how it goes.
Yeah, I thought for sure that I was going to get murdered. Yeah, I was like, oh, somebody just cut the power to my house. Like, where's the home invader that's going to stab me in the face?
Yep.
Yeah, it was perfect.
And right now, it's really not even raining that much, but this morning it was pouring down rain. And what kind of idiots are out here trying to keep a live fire going, cooking thick-cut bacon in the pouring rain?
Oh, man, that fire-grilled bacon, though. That was a real treat.
Yeah?
Yeah, especially, and the fried duck eggs to go with it. Give me a break. I can't think of a better way to start the day than with whiskey, duck eggs, and bacon cooked over an open flame.
Yeah, Corey Ann cooked those eggs for us. It was raining too much to do the eggs, quite frankly. I knew the cast iron was going to get filled with water. So we cooked those inside, but the bacon we cooked outside. And you and I definitely had a moment where we were just looking at each other going, man, this bacon's so good. When's the last time you've had fire roasted bacon?
Oh, man, years.
Yeah?
Years. Camping. You know, that's really the only time most people do, like, fire grilled anything.
That's a good point.
Is camping. And, you know, a lot of people, I mean, generally even I bring, like, you know, a propane stove, like a little cassette burner or whatever to run a saute pan on. But, I mean, I love cooking with fire as well. It's so fun. And it just, I don't know, it makes you feel like a caveman.
Yeah.
Which is great. I mean, I enjoy that.
Yeah, it's definitely caveman style, right?
Yeah. I mean, last time, it's been a while since I've been camping. It's been about, actually, is it now? It's the weekend after Labor Day, right?
Was last weekend Labor Day?
I believe so.
Did we have the Monday off?
I can't remember.
The days all run together.
Yeah, we're within about 2 years ago, almost exactly. 2 years ago, the weekend after Labor Day, I went camping. And it was a pork loin, just like a marinated pork loin roast, right? Not a tenderloin, not like the little guy, but like a big chunk, you know, like a 6-inch long or 7-inch long chunk of pork. And I found a good stick that I speared through the whole thing, you know, sharpened it up, and then just kind of hung it next to our fire.
Oh, so lengthwise for sure.
Yeah, and weather was very similar to how it is now. Maybe a little less water, but, you know, overcast, starting to get chilly, so we had a fire going all day. And just hung it off the side, like near the fire, kind of tried to like line it up so the smoke would be blowing over it, and just kind of like, I guess you would call it like an open, like a pit smoke or whatever, or a pit roast, this pork shoulder or a pork loin for like 4 hours. And it was incredible. It had a nice, you know, like 1/2-inch smoke ring around the whole side of it. And it was unbelievable. It was like
4 hours.
Yeah, 4 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you don't mind smoking a pork loin. But, I mean, I feel like most people would say you want a pork loin to be hot and fast. Like, I always felt like a pork loin should only be on the smoker for an hour.
Well, maybe if you're doing it like in an enclosed smoker, for sure. But this was definitely like very open air and over a low flame. Like,
sure.
And I was camping, but it's also me. So I absolutely had an Insta-read like thermometer on me. So I'm like taking the temperature every so often. It's like, all right, where are we at? It's like, oh, no, it's still like around 100 degrees, needs to go more. But yeah, we did it nice, low and slow, and it turned out fantastic, super juicy. You know, just sliced it up and ate it, and then everything that we didn't eat, we just, you know, shredded the next day. I just beat up with a knife real quick, threw in a bunch of Sweet Baby Rays, and made it sandwiches out of it.
So it doesn't really matter to you, I mean, as long as, you know, people talk about, especially in a restaurant, people talk about that danger zone that you keep the meat in, stuff like that. And I know it doesn't matter quite so much when you're smoking it, but as long as you bring that meat up to 145 and not really further than that, you can keep that pork loin nice and tender.
Yeah, I mean, I think we ended up finishing it somewhere around like 150, 152 before pulling it off to let it rest. But yeah, the whole danger zone thing, man, I mean, it's kind of a slippery slope, right? Because like what you talk about, like fermentation and stuff like that, you know, like,
right.
Or if you're going to make creme fraiche, for instance, you know, or like a sour cream, essentially, you literally, the procedure for doing this is to take like it's like somewhere between like 5 to 7 parts heavy cream to 1 part buttermilk. And then you literally just like mix it together and let it sit out open air for 36 to 48 hours.
Yeah, let it ferment naturally in the open air.
Let the cultures, you know, do their thing and process everything. And it's like, according to safety and health and sanitation standards, it's like, oh my God, it's like, this is absolutely terrible. You can't eat this. It's bad. But clearly it's not. You know, they'll also tell you, it's like, oh, you can't cook pork to anything less. Like whole pork should be cooked to at least 155 degrees. Wrong. I use that more as like a base guideline as opposed to like a strict rule to follow.
Sure, it's a guideline.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. And then things change, if it's a well-kept heritage breed hog that you're getting from a farm that you know and trust. I mean, little stuff like that can allow you some leeway, right?
Sure. And I mean, let's talk about eggs too. Like they'll tell you, what is it? Serve safe or whatever. It's like,
Sure.
oh, you need to absolutely refrigerate eggs all the time. It's like, what do you do with your eggs when you get them? You just let them sit out. And they're good for like, what, a week, 2 weeks before you wash the poop off of them?
Yeah, we'll let them sit or we'll keep them refrigerated. It just kind of depends because Corianne likes to sell some of her eggs or she likes to give them away to friends. And we don't give away super poopy eggs. So if they're so messy that we have to wash them off, They'll go in the fridge, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are covered in that antibiotic film, basically, that comes out of the chicken. It's the whole reason why a chicken can sit on eggs for a month and they don't go bad and they develop into a chicken.
Right.
So if you wash that off, yeah, the eggs need to be refrigerated or they go bad. But if you don't wash it off, they'll keep as long as they need to keep. I think that's something that people don't realize about chickens. Chickens are only laying 1 egg a day, right? But they'll have a dozen chicks sometimes underneath of them. And it's because there are hormonal things going on where a chicken will lay that 1 egg and they go broody. And then they might lay for another 12 to 14 days before those eggs, start to actually mature. And then it's another month beyond that. And so they need that antiseptic antibiotic film on the outside that naturally occurs from the chicken in order to keep from spoiling, right?
I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, my wife has 2 biology bachelors, so
yeah,
I get all this stuff.
Knows, yeah, she clearly knows more than I do about about chicken egg antibiotic film.
Right, but before we even knew anything about any of that stuff, going back 100, 200, 300 years, we just knew that if you didn't wash the egg in the local river, that it held for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, right?
Right.
So, I mean, it kind of is that natural progression of why do these eggs hold? It's the same reason why we have pasteurization. Why does this raw milk make people sick? Oh, it's because these bad bacteria, grow in the milk, and if we bring it up to a certain temperature and hold it there, then it kills all that bacteria. That's essentially what pasteurization is. So it's a lot of the same things, but we don't necessarily need the science, the chemical analysis. We don't necessarily need the pasteurization in order to hold this stuff. Our ancestors have been able to do it in different ways for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
So discovering what those things were, or rather rediscovering what those methods of preservation were thousands of years ago or even hundreds of years ago is something that is starting to take hold a little more in the culinary world right now, don't you think?
I mean, people are definitely getting back to their roots. You're seeing a lot more, feel like in the early 2000s, people are getting super, or even mid 2000s, 2013, you get molecular gastronomy and people getting super experimental,
right?
With, radical new methods of preparing stuff.
So much of that stuff was BS. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the whiskey flavored bubbles and stuff.
I mean, everything has its place, and I absolutely applaud people for trying to do new things with food, because I mean, we've obviously the longer civilization goes on, the harder it is to do things that people haven't done before,
right?
So to all the guys that are doing this molecular gastronomy stuff, hell yeah, keep doing it. It's freaking awesome.
Of course,
it's not necessarily up my alley, but as of late, you get a lot of people that are getting back to roots, making things simple again. It's good food doesn't have to be complicated.
It reminds me of that deconstructed dish you made for me. It was a 1 bite, 1 spoon thing, and I'm trying to remember what it was. It wasn't a ratatouille. It was something with marinara base, a few veggies, a little meat. Gosh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I don't remember what it was, and I don't expect you to remember because you made so many of those different things.
It was ratatouille. I served it in that wooden spoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was delicata squash and roasted heirloom tomato that we had preserved, and oh man, there was something else. It was pickled onion.
Yeah.
I can't remember what else. Oh, there was roasted eggplant too, was there not?
I think
Did
there
we have
was
roasted eggplant.
That's why I felt like it was Ratatouille. I just remember thinking, why is this bite so much better than any Ratatouille I've ever had? Because I don't like Ratatouille. But then that one bite that you gave me, it was like all of the singular components were singing in and amongst themselves, but it also melded so well in my mouth. It was like the one perfect bite. That's the kind of, I don't think you could call that molecular gastronomy, but that's the kind of cooking that really does intrigue me, is when someone is able to make something where it's that one perfect bite. Isn't that what we're always looking for?
Yeah. And that's why I love doing like little small things like that. Like small bites are fantastic.
That wasn't even a tapa. It was just a one spoon thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was literally just a little serving spoon, like a tiny little spoon with, little, maybe half-inch by half-inch cubes of these respective, roasted vegetables and some of that extra garlic, marinara, and then, some nice finishing salt, a little grana padano, like a Parmesan-style cheese, and some nice olive oil, a little nice Arbequena olive oil. You get to compose that absolute, like, perfect bite. And, it's all going in their mouth at once. It's not like, okay, I'm putting everything on this plate and I'm going to leave it up to the guests to get all the ratios right. It's like, no, I'm in control. I tell you what to eat. Put this in your mouth.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
And nothing else. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. And it comes back around to kind of doing that super fine, small batch stuff.
Yeah.
It's not going to be sustainable if I go into catering or something like that. But one of the things I love about doing with my barbecue is I love being able to just do the highest quality of everything.
Yeah. Well, it's, and honestly, I feel like it just goes hand in hand with being into food or being a chef is like, at least like 90% of the chefs I've met, we're all control freaks. Like, I don't want anybody else touch it.
I've never considered myself a control freak, but I do like being able to make those minor adjustments to my food and see what happens to the flavor.
Right. I am absolutely a control freak. You're maybe in the 10% then, because I am 100% control freak. It's if I'm doing something in the kitchen and somebody else tries to get their hands in my business.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, if I'm cooking my barbecue, I don't want somebody else jumping in.
You're telling me you're not a control freak at all. You don't consider yourself one. So if I told you to cook that New York strip that you've got in there for me, well done, you'd be okay with that?
Oh,
yeah.
No.
You should see the face he's making right now.
All right. That's a fair point. I didn't really think about that.
Yeah.
And, it's funny you bring up that New York strip because I'm not even going to be eating any of it because I don't do beef.
Yeah, but it would still kill you inside to cook it anything past medium.
It would. I would probably just burn it out of spite.
I hate to admit, but I've absolutely done that a couple of times when somebody's ordered a really nice steak at a restaurant that I've been working at and they order it well done. Maybe once or twice I've put a steak in the deep fryer. Maybe I've intentionally tried to turn it into a boot.
I don't feel like that would be the worst way to cook a steak medium rare, though. Or well done.
Oh, no. I mean, maybe it could be executed in a way that would be acceptable, but the way I was executing it was not in that way. It was absolutely like, I am going to do everything I can. I'm going to take all of my knowledge of food and all my years of experience and use it for evil and ruin this steak.
That's so funny because you're actually the one that introduced me to the idea of medium rare plus, which is, I think it's 142 to 145, something like that is considered medium rare plus.
God, I hate people.
No, but you also were the one that said if you go to a good steak restaurant, like a good steak restaurant, and you say, I don't necessarily want it medium, but medium rare is a little bit too rare, could you do something in between like a medium rare plus? And if you frame it that way, if it's a good steak restaurant where they really take their steak seriously, they might actually appreciate that you're taking that kind of care.
Sure. I mean, it's almost the equivalent of like somebody ordering a steak like blue rare as opposed to rare, or Pittsburgh blue, or however you want to call it. There's a bunch of different ways to say basically lightly seared.
Sure.
Or rather heavily seared or very hotly seared for a very short amount of time.
And if you hated people that ordered something blue rare, you'd probably just throw it on their plate. Like you'd sear it with a torch on the outside and then throw it on.
Right. Or maybe like heat up a hatchet.
Yes, the hatchet.
And just how's it going, Coy?
I forgot about the hatchet. That's amazing.
Yeah, I have not forgotten about the hatchet. I will never forget about the hatchet.
That's such a good idea, though, isn't it?
He kept driving it.
Yeah.
Driving that idea. I mean, it's like, no, you really got to do this hatchet thing. Well, you know what, Coy? The idea is stuck. I'm going to do something with a hatchet eventually.
We may do that. We may do that. If this whole pop-up thing ends up happening, we may end up doing something on a hatchet. I like the idea. I think visually it'd be pretty stunning.
Yeah, I feel like it would absolutely work with barbecue, too. Fine dining or upscale, but at a barbecue spot, especially if there was axe throwing involved.
The one thing that I would love to do with barbecue, but I don't think it could ever happen, is a conveyor belt barbecue place.
See, the fat guy in me loves the idea of that.
But the control freak in you,
Yeah, hates it.
yes. Because it would sit underneath those hot lamps and go around and around and around. You'd have no control over the doneness level of it.
No.
If you could find a way to wrap everything, I mean, that would be the hard part. People wouldn't be able to see it before they grabbed it. But if you could wrap everything well and just keep it at that stable temperature, because we all know, ribs need a rest time, brisket needs a rest time, pork shoulder needs a rest time. The baby back ribs that we made today, I insisted on letting them rest for 45 minutes before we touched them, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't have eaten them any sooner. I would have stopped you if you had tried to cut them any sooner than that, Andy.
Sure, fair.
But I didn't need to. You know what you're doing.
That shoulder is kind of the same way. Although the shoulder, I'm not as rigid on. The shoulder, if I could, I would let that sit for 2 hours. Honestly, I'd wrap it for 2 or 3 hours. I have no qualms with that because I have a weird way of cooking a shoulder. I like to leave it in a pan. After 3 hours on the smoker, I like to throw it in a pan, and I like to finish it off that way, and it reserves all those liquids. Mm-hmm. I always want those liquids to be turned back into the meat.
Yeah, and you add all of that liquid back into the meat, you're going to get all of it back in there. It's unlikely.
Oh yeah, no. You're not going to get all of it back in. But so my process is I'll take the shoulder out of the liquids, I'll break it down, and then I'll pour the liquid back in until I feel like it's reached a saturation point, and then I'll let it sit for a little bit longer, only half an hour.
Like soak everything up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anybody that ordered a pork shoulder from me last week knows exactly what I'm talking about because I broke it down and I pulled it, and each of the gallon bags ended up being 4 to 5 pounds. It depends on the size of the shoulder that they bought.
Right.
And the liquids that went back in, some of that is going to cook back out, quite frankly, but not all of it. Some of it's going to soak up into the meat, and that's just kind of that's the au jus, right? That's the liquid that is coming out of the meat, and if you don't use all of that liquid, it's still intensely flavorful. Intensely. I was telling you earlier, one of the things that I love doing with that liquid is putting it into rice because it is intensely flavorful.
Yeah. I'm interested in tasting it. I'm wondering if you could actually, if it's light, I know it's flavorful, but if it's light enough, you likely could just reduce that liquid as well.
Sure, make it into a sauce.
Yeah.
I've done that before.
Or how I was talking about the gelatin or the aspic. Like you could reduce it as well and just reduce that into an aspic and suspend some of that pulled pork into it.
See, I've never done that before. I have taken the liquids and turned them into sauce before. I've boiled them down, added a few other things, a little bit of tomato base, stuff like that, and made it into my own smoked porky barbecue sauce.
Yeah, it'd be good to make beans with, too.
Yes, we've done that before.
Yeah.
The pinto beans were a long ways from it, but what is that?
It was like baked beans.
Well, the New Year's beans and ham dish, I forget what it's called, but it's something that's popular. It used to be popular.
Black-eyed peas and ham?
Yeah. Doesn't it have a specific name, though?
I don't know.
I don't know either, but it is black beans and ham and onions and seasoning and stuff like that. Yeah. Traditionally, the wife and I have always made that for New Year's, but we've always tried to reserve some kind of a smoked bone, either a ham bone or a shoulder bone, and I've always cooked that down and made a broth with it, and then that's what we cook the beans with because it adds that little something, It's almost like a smoky je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely love doing that with any kind of like black-eyed peas or split green peas. Like if you ever make pea soup,
sure, yeah,
always go for the smoked ham hock. because again, with that nice little smoky flavor, it is nice.
And that's something else we were talking about today, actually, is the difference between a ham and a smoked pork of some kind. I don't rub my ribs and shoulder with mustard like a lot of people do. That seemed like a little bit of a point of contention with you.
I mean, I'm not gonna tell you how to make your barbecue because it's delicious.
Thank you.
But if I were making smoked pork, I would absolutely rub it in mustard first. And I'd use, like, your rub is fantastic. That rub is great. We talked about the celery salt and feel like you can back off a little bit on the celery salt or whatever.
That was an experiment. I've only been using celery salt for the last 6 months.
Yeah, and it's good. I mean, I like celery salt and rub. But, I mean, celery salt is strong flavored. So, but anyway, I digress. I love your rub, but I would absolutely rub in mustard first.
That's fair. That's fair.
Only because that's the way I was shown and that's the way I've always done it, and it's kind of just ingrained in my brain.
I hate to say this, but I'm going to be a little hesitant to put mustard in my rub now because at the water ski event where we catered, we did have one person that was deathly allergic to mustard. And I can't believe that would change the way I view all of this. But because I don't use mustard necessarily in my rub or as a base to my rub anyways, and then I had that person that was deathly allergic to mustard, it makes it difficult for me. It's hard for me to now look at it and go, oh, yeah, I definitely need to add mustard.
I see what you're saying. I get where you're coming from.
Oh, I'm not using that as an excuse, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just kind of one of those weird idiosyncrasies that I now have.
It is weird. And I mean, like you were saying, a lot of people do use mustard, at least ground mustard in their rub, too. And the fact that you don't, it's almost like fate, you know?
Yeah.
You were there for that person.
Yeah. But here's the thing. People have been loving my barbecue for so long, and I've never used mustard powder, or I've never used mustard as the base. And as much as you say, you know, you really should be using mustard, since I haven't had the complaints up until now, I don't know, it puts me in a weird position. And I'm not adverse to the mustard, by the way. So when I've done double smoked spiral cut hams for Thanksgiving or Christmas, definitely, I have rubbed that thing down with whole grain Dijon mustard and honey. I'll make like a mixture of the honey and Dijon. I'll do a little bit of my barbecue seasoning on the outside. It is phenomenal. It is incredible. But I've never used it in my barbecue.
Yeah, and again, honestly, like, diversity makes the world enjoyable too, right? I don't want all pork shoulder to taste the same. That's boring.
Fair.
So you keep doing yours without mustard.
I might have to do like a half and half now. It's going to take a little bit more research. And again, that's part of the reason why us car guys get so attracted to food is the experimentation, right?
Yeah, I mean, that does make sense. I do like playing with cars. I do like trying to figure out like different things that'll work, you know, and it is obviously a lot of trial and error.
Are smokers any different? I mean, look at the way we've been running it today, messing with the intakes, messing with a fire, messing with...
Right, and it was water-cooled today as well.
Yes, it was.
We modernized.
Yes, it was. It was water-cooled. That's a good way of putting it. It was raining so much that my smoker was having a hard time keeping temp. We had to build a bigger fire than usual.
I mean, you got the job done, which, again, you know, is like probably from being a car guy. Well, you have a little bit of background in food as well, and it's like, you know, in the kitchen, like when no matter what happens, you just got to make it work.
Right.
So it's like, oh, I'm not running at the right temperature. Bigger fire.
Right. We got to hit. And again, it's one of those weird things where barbecue, you don't cook to time, you cook to temperature. But when you're cooking for somebody else and you have to hit a time, all of that then is in flux.
Right. Yeah. Barbecue is really one of the most tricky things just because it takes so much time to do anything. You really have to anticipate. It's not easy.
And it takes a lot of intuition, weirdly.
Those ribs were perfect, though. You totally called it.
Oh, thank you.
How did you test them? Because I pick them up by like that, just about the halfway point, and kind of let them fold over, and you just kind of look for the meat to start breaking apart. You want it to start splitting, but you don't want it to. Obviously, if it's falling off completely, you've overdone it.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, you were like, I think those ribs are done, and I went over and just gave them the quick little pickup test, and they were absolutely 100% perfect. Like, not a degree off.
That's a weird thing about the experience and the intuition that comes with it. And it's something that you can only gain through experience and intuition. But the ribs, I don't I don't really know how I test them is the hard part. I'm touching the bones. I'm twisting them. I'm seeing if they're giving, but if they want to give. It's kind of like when you're working on a car and it won't start, but you're doing things and it wants to start, right?
Right.
And everybody has that moment or has had that moment. They've worked on their dad with a car or something like that, where they've heard the term, it wants to start, but it won't. And what that means is we have things happening and it's very close to starting, but there's something else that's keeping it.
There's one little minor thing.
Exactly.
It's just keeping it over the edge. Yeah.
So I'll push on the bones. I'll give them a little bit of wiggle. I'll grab a bone and I'll actually lift the ribs up. And if I see that they're bending, if the whole rack isn't coming with the bone as I move it, if it's what's the word I'm looking for? Think about if a slinky is kind of pulled out along a table, right? And you just grab one of the slinky pieces, one of the small pieces of the metal, and you pick it up. Not the entire slinky is going to come up, right? Just that one little piece of metal is going to raise.
Yeah, you're just looking for the meat to be soft.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But there's a certain level there where if you're lifting the bone and the meat is splitting, it's overcooked. If you're lifting the bone and the entire rack is wanting to lift up, then it's not done enough. There's this point.
Yeah, and it's really like it's neither.
Right.
It's neither one nor the other. It's somewhere in between. And there's like somewhere in between is a fairly large range, but there's one spot in particular in between, which is the right spot.
It's like the bones are in limbo.
Yes.
I hadn't really thought about it that way, but you have a good point.
Yeah, you got to anticipate carryover too, because you want it to be just a little on the stiff side because it's going to sit for about 45 minutes covered first.
Exactly. It's going to pick up 5 to 10 degrees when you wrap it. Mm-hmm. And you do need to wrap it because you need those liquids to stay in the meat. You need to rest. You need it to bathe in its own liquids. And if there's no liquids left inside of the ribs, then there's nothing that's going to evaporate out while it's wrapped and then soak back in. It's a weird concept that you can only really understand when you've seen it, when you've had that experience. It's the same way with the pulled pork. We cook to temperature, but after it's come up to the temperature and after you wrap it, I've had competition guys tell me before, they'll pull their pork off at a specific temperature, so like 198, let's say, because their ideal temperature is 203 for competition. And they know that when they pull it off and wrap it within 2 minutes, the temperature at the bone is still going to increase another 5 degrees. Because that surface temperature is still higher than the bone temperature, and once they equalize... Right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it takes at least, on a big pork roast, at least a half an hour for it to fully equalize or even get anywhere close.
And, sorry, what did we say we let those ribs sit? 45 minutes?
I think they might have gone a little bit longer.
Yeah, an hour or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was maybe an hour.
But they really had not started to cool down that much.
No, they were still warm. I mean, they were wrapped.
Sure. The pork shoulder is the same way. I remember when I did the pork shoulders last weekend, I let my pork shoulder sit for a long time, just to be perfectly honest. And I remember when we pulled them out of the wrap and I started breaking them down, they were still too hot to handle. Like it was not, they had not come down in temperature as much as a person would think. When we say it's come down in temperature, that can mean a lot of different things. And for me, it's too hot to handle, just a little bit too hot to handle. I wish that I could stick my fingers into it and not be burned, but I'm still being burned a little bit. That's kind of the level that I'm looking for. Hey, the lovely Corianne just came out here and gave us a sample of this tomato sauce that she's making, which is incredible. Kevin, back me up.
Yeah. I mean, tomato and beet, right?
Yeah, tomato and beet.
It's fantastic.
So we have to circle back on a couple of questions. First of all, the egg thing, when you don't wash the egg. Can you just quickly break down what exactly is happening with a farm fresh-laid egg that hasn't been washed?
Hey, guys. So when a chicken lays an egg, at the very end of the reproductive cycle, before the egg leaves the body, the egg is coated with what's called the bloom, and it is a membrane on the outside of the egg that is porous. It allows air to come in and out, and moisture to come in and out, but doesn't allow bacteria, viruses, or fungi from getting into the potentially developing embryo.
Is it antibiotic, like specifically antibiotic?
It's not antibiotic, meaning that it kills the bacteria. It just does, it prevents them from passing through the porous shell. So that's why a chicken can sit on eggs for 28 days and they don't rot and you get baby chicks.
That's so wild.
That's also why you can leave eggs on the counter for a month and they won't go bad.
So how close was I, Kevin?
I mean, I'm pretty sure I said like 3 weeks.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I mean the science behind it. I feel like I was pretty close.
Oh, yeah, you were absolutely close. I mean, she used bigger words.
She used the doctor-specific words.
Right. Bloom. I guess bloom's not that big of a word, but it's a in this particular case, a small but very meaningful word.
Sure. It's fair. But coming back around to the whole palate thing, you know, the thing about Corianne that I love is that she's able to taste things and kind of know, like, what it tastes like, what it needs, the salty, the sweet. And I don't know, you know, how much of that is learned versus how much of that is just intuition. What exactly does it feel like when you're tasting my food and you're saying you need this or you need that? It's something that I don't really understand, but you seem to kind of intuitively know.
Well, I started cooking really young. I cook a lot with my nose. When I taste something, I breathe through my nose so that I get all of the aromatic oils to hit all of the receptors in the back of my palate and in my nose. And just remember, 60% of your taste is smell. So do I have more taste buds? I don't know. Do I have a more sensitive nose? I don't know. I learned a lot about spices and herbs growing up, so I have somewhat of an understanding. I'm not a professional of what a particular spice or herb might bring to a dish, and Chef Kevin can definitely take it to the next level on that. But, you know, if something needs more cumin or it needs smoky paprika or onion and garlic or salt and pepper, that's just usually what I think about. And I try to smell something before I add it to a dish. So today I made tomato beet soup. It's a rainy day. Fall is starting. I have a ton of beets from a patient, and I was just trying to think of creative ways to use 20 pounds of beets. So I made red velvet cupcake cookies, but I used beetroot as not only a moisturizing element, but also as a coloring element, because red velvet is loaded with food dye. And I'd rather use beets.
I'm pretty sure traditionally it was originally done with beets.
Yeah, I probably think you're right.
I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. And then we made a quick pickle beet. Good suggestion from Kevin. I like it with a lot of herbs, and so it's got cloves and cinnamon and black pepper.
Oh, perfect.
And a little bit of vanilla and some sugar, so it's kind of sweet and tangy. There's onions in it, which I love, pickled red onions. So that's under the vacuum sealer, just hanging out. And then, this soup. And Kevin, you made a really good suggestion with the tomato beet soup. It was too acidic to begin with. And I said, well, I don't want to keep adding sugar, and I don't want to make a huge, super creamy soup, but I was like, it needs more beets. So I just pureed another 2 or 3 pounds of beets into it, and I think that really balanced the acidity out.
That's crazy to me because, I don't know, beets are starchy. They are sweet when you roast them, but they're not necessarily sweet to begin with. Like, if you just crunch into a raw beet, it's not like it's going to be super sweet, right?
They taste like dirt.
Yeah, they taste like dirt.
I disagree with both of you, but that's okay.
They're super earthy. And I mean, that's not necessarily used in like a derogatory term. I don't necessarily mean that in a bad way. Like, earthy is what most people would say, but like beets are just so earthy.
They're very earthy, but they have a lot of their own natural sweetness. And so these were roasted, peeled, and then I pureed them in the Vitamix and then mixed it in with just tomato sauce from the tomatoes we've grown. And then honey, onion, garlic, salt, pepper, cumin, coconut milk.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I mean, I wouldn't add anything to it at this point, but, you know, it would be nice, like, when you serve it, to finish it with just, like, a little bit of olive oil on top.
I was going to do olive oil, maybe some goat cheese, and some fresh chopped parsley.
Sounds wonderful.
I even feel like that'd make a really good ragu, like a meat sauce.
You could 100% just, like, pour that over some ground meat or sausage.
Yeah.
Turn it into a little bolognese.
We could do a bolognese and put it on pasta.
Yeah.
Do you want that with dinner tonight? Just asking.
Oh, we got so much food for dinner. We got that pulled pork. We still have to cook those New York strips.
Yeah, we've got pulled pork. There's some New Yorks in there. Yeah.
Tacos.
tacos, rib tip tacos.
Oh, the tacos I'm really excited for you to try, by the way, because they're these blue corn tortillas that Corianne made with a couple of her friends, and they're just ridiculously good.
I have never had a bad homemade tortilla experience. Like even like the lesser homemade tortillas I've had are still amazing.
Yeah, this was really, really awesome. My friend, she boiled them the night before with lime and then just rinsed them so they were warm and cooked and ready to go. And then we ground them twice and pressed them. And they're delicious. The dough tasted fabulous. It kind of felt like I was playing with Play-Doh.
Yeah. I mean, corn masa or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. That's funny. Yeah, boiling corn, that hard corn with lye. That's funny.
Now, for listeners, it's lime, not lye. So if you mix those up, you'll die.
Oh, you used actual lime?
That's what they brought.
Okay, because I have used lye.
Wow.
Lye, Lye, in preparing corn products before as well.
Make sure it's well rinsed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, ours was generally getting fried.
Okay. Good.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
yeah,
were making house-made corn nuts.
Oh, nice.
So we get this giant like old world like white corn.
Hominy corn.
Yeah. And it was dried and unprocessed, so we'd soak it in lye.
Now the lye takes the outer hull off. The outer skin.
Yeah, it like dissolves it. Yeah, it turns it, and so the water that this lye is mixed into like gets all like weird and goopy and gross. And you absolutely have to rinse the ever-loving shit out of it.
Yes.
Because it's all starch, right? Like, technically the outside hull is another type of starch, isn't it?
Is it starch or is it technically like a bran? I mean, I know bran's really referring to like grains, but it's mostly just cellulose, I thought.
It's a cellulose. It's a non-digestible fiber.
Yeah, exactly. So similar to bran, or like what you would call bran on like rice or wheat, but
if you don't break that hull down, then you can't access the proteins and vitamins inside the corn.
Right.
Which is why sometimes you know what you had for dinner the next day.
Yes.
Fair. And you know what's funny about that whole mix that you guys made was I tried some of the blue corn as it was coming out of the grinder, and it was super good. It tasted like corn grits, like the best corn grits I've ever had.
It was delicious.
That would be fun to make. I guess it would be like blue polenta.
Right.
With some of that blue corn.
Well, we have
cornmeal.
5 pounds of it still at the house, so...
Oh, man, we might have to do that.
Do some blue polenta.
Yeah.
Ooh, we could do blue polenta with a mushroom sauce and some bison.
Oh, yeah, that sounds fun.
Ooh, yes.
Kind of roll with the blue.
Yeah.
Okay, I have to interrupt you.
Please.
I didn't finish my recipe.
Oh, please. Yeah.
So right before serving, I would top that blue polenta not only with the mushroom sauce and the bison, but with chunky blue cheese and some toasted Oregon hazelnuts.
Ugh! Sploosh.
Because I just really think that the blue cheese could stand up to all of that.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't think it would get overwhelming. Do you think?
No. No.
Kevin, you're going to know exactly what we're talking about when you try these tortillas, because, I mean, the flavor of them is just, it's not like it's super bold or anything, but they definitely have their own flavor. Like, I could cook these tortillas and eat them by themselves, honestly.
Oh, yeah. They're really yummy. It'll be good tonight, especially with rib tips in them.
Oh, man.
Okay, yeah, so that is actually what I wanted to talk about. We had rib tips for lunch, right? And again, it was pouring down rain. I had the Santa Maria grill fired up. The rib tips that we put on were pooling with rainwater. I don't know how sanitary that is. I'm just going to throw it out. Maybe don't do that if you're listening at home.
It's good Oregon rain. It's cleansing.
Yeah, something like that. But yeah, literally, it was pouring down rain. We were getting so wet while we were cooking. But man, we were just having so much fun cooking over the live fire. Back me up here, Chef. When is the last time that you sat in front of a brick stove with a live fire running?
I can't remember. I honestly can't remember.
Watching the chickens. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, last time I was here.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
About a year ago.
This is a whole new setup for you. You hadn't seen this yet, but this Santa Maria grill, I'm just so in love with it because I don't know, man. cooking over a live fire, it's not a health thing for me.
It's primal.
It's barbaric and amazing.
It's caveman style for sure.
Absolutely.
Your primitive brain just kicks in. There's something that really reaches to the depths of our brain that reminds us of cooking out in the wild, over open wood, out in the wilderness, fire going.
We were totally just talking about this earlier about camping. Yeah, cooking over an open fire. It's like being a caveman.
And it's so much more difficult, by the way, moving the fire around, knowing how much of the flames need to be licking your meat.
Right. It's... Oh.
Well, yeah.
Andy.
I know. That's what she said.
That's what she said.
Good gravy.
Now I'm going to look for a stripper named Flames.
Tell you what, I'll write it on on like a sticker. There we go.
Oh, perfect.
I'm just saying, when we were cooking them, there was a certain point where we sat down and we were like, oh, those flames are really close to the meat. We probably should move the wood around a little bit because we had cranked the grill all the way up. It was as high as it was going to go, and the flames were still touching the meat, right?
Yep.
And so we had this moment where we were like, ooh, we need to calm that flame down a little bit.
It was at the exact same time, too. We totally looked right at each other and was just like, yeah, it's like, I said it, but you're like, yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. It's like, we need to slow this down a little bit, pump the brakes.
And it's so funny that we did that, by the way, because you have a culinary background.
I do.
I am just some dude in his backyard that likes to barbecue.
Okay, slow your roll there, Chief. You have a culinary background, too. You were raised in a restaurant with your family.
But I don't have, the culinary arts degree that Kevin has.
Sure, but you can learn a lot from life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, honestly, if I could go back in time and not go to culinary school and save that $50,000 for a down payment on a Porsche,
fair.
I would absolutely do that because after culinary school was a lot of fun. It was a great experience, but they made all these promises. Oh, you'll be a certified executive chef and all this stuff, and it's total BS. I mean, you walk into a restaurant after graduating from culinary school with I was unlike a lot of the students there. I had a little bit of restaurant experience going in. Like a lot of these people, nothing, just going in completely dry. And so even with a year experience, walking into a restaurant and telling them it's like, hey, I'm a certified executive chef. I can run your restaurant. You get laughed at. Mm-hmm. It's like, here, cut some vegetables. We'll hire you as a prep cook, and you can go from there.
Right.
So honestly, like I said, it was a great experience, but I learned so much more from just working in the industry.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Chef Casey Gonzalez said exactly the same thing to us, by the way. He has a personal mission to move people up in his restaurant, people that start as dishwashers, but they show an interest in the food. He has a personal mission to move them up and teach them how to cook rather than having them go to school. And you know what? Going back to the car thing, there's a lot of crossover there. Because if you started in a huge mechanic shop, and you came out of, I don't know, one of the schools, UTI or whatever, it's the same way. You're going to become a lube tech. And it's not because you don't know what you're doing. It's because, well, actually, yeah, it is. It's because you don't know what you're doing. You don't have that real world experience.
Yeah, you know what you're doing in theory.
Exactly.
But knowing what you're doing in theory and knowing what you're doing for real are two very different things.
You haven't spent 50 hours 500 hours, 5,000 hours, 10,000 hours doing brake jobs and oil changes. You don't know exactly what you're doing. You haven't spent 10,000 hours chopping vegetables. You haven't spent 10,000 hours making rabbit ragu every day. You don't have that experience, right?
Rabbit ragu sounds really good.
Oh, I shouldn't have said that. We have a couple of rabbits in the freezer still, don't we? Mm-hmm. They might go pretty well with this beet sauce here.
Yeah, we ran into this last time I was here. They are in the freezer.
Sorry, dude.
Yeah.
I need to learn how to thaw more stuff out, but realistically, how many
you
dishes are we going to cook?
Thaw anything out. We've got so much food.
So to our listeners, on Saturdays and Sundays, we usually do a lot of bulk cooking, prep cooking, so that I don't have to cook and make lunches during the week. So that's really, they're just cooking so I can have food, because I work ridiculous hours right now and I don't cook. So this is just very, very helpful. I'm going to eat well all week and my staff has to smell it.
I almost wish, what are those steam buns called?
Bows?
Bow.
Yeah. I want to make some pulled pork bao buns. I wish that I knew how to do that.
I want you to do that for me.
I probably should figure that out because it's one thing that I've always wanted to make because I love barbecue pork, the Korean barbecue pork bao. I love those steamed barbecue pork buns, and I really would love to make them with my barbecue.
It's so easy to make bao.
So, tomorrow?
Yeah, it's so easy.
I'm sure it is. I don't have a steamer or anything. I'm sure I could figure it out.
Yeah.
So, Chef Kevin, can we make bao tomorrow?
Yeah, I think we can make that happen.
We might have a little bit of barbecue laying around.
Just a little bit.
Just a smidge.
Fair.
Oh, going back to that, by the way, we keep getting sidetracked. So we started the morning off with the fire roasted or the fire made bacon, right? We got a couple of photos on there. Mm-hmm. Chef Kevin got a great video of the bacon sizzling away over the open fire. That was incredible. And then Corianne does solid. She made some duck eggs. Unfortunately, in the house, because it was raining so hard, I just didn't want the eggs to get washed out. I knew the pan would get full of rainwater.
Well, I fried them in bacon fat. I know you suffered greatly. The woe I could sense.
Yeah, it was just awful. The worst.
It was the worst. And we started our day off with those, and I don't think it took too long after that before we threw the rib tips on.
Yeah, that was our 11Z's meal.
And we talked about that quite a bit, Chef Kevin, the rib tips. I'm a huge fan of those. As a matter of fact, when I was buying those yesterday, I was in a big box store called Winco that's kind of local to us in the Northwest. And this is nothing against Winco. It's just the way the cookie crumbles. I was looking at these rib tips that were in the package, and they were like $3 or $4, $3.50 a pound. And I thought, I'm not going to pay $3.50 a pound for these offcuts. This is stuff that I ate when I was a kid. This is poor food. This is stuff that my mom introduced me to because they were very poor growing up in the South, right?
Yeah, it's throwaway. It's like what most people just toss.
And a lot of this stuff, chicken wings are the perfect example. Mm-hmm. It's hard to find chicken wings for $3.50, $4 a pack, or cheaper than that. But they're kind of the offcuts of the chicken. When you're making chicken thighs, chicken breasts, and those are the important pieces that everybody wants, the other stuff is the offcast. But these days, they're getting more popular, and so they're more expensive, right? And the rib tips, I was thinking, man, there must be something going on where it's something similar to that. And then, of course, I found a pack that was 98 cents a pound, which was what I was expecting. And I said, oh, okay, I found these at 98 cents a pound. I'm going to buy them now. Because for me, listen, I love rib tips. I love the way they taste. I love the way they cook. But again, going back to it, it's like a poor food. I just can't bring myself to pay, the butcher price for them. I digress. I shouldn't be saying all of that. If your butcher wants that for them, you really should pay it because they're an incredible piece of meat. But anyways, I found some, and so we cooked them over the live fire, which really, truly is the only way that I want to cook those these days. It's just, there's something about, you get a little bit of that caramelization on the outside. This last Friday, I released an episode with the Barbecue Ninja. Craig talked about how he likes to brulee the dry rub or whatever it is on the outside. He'll have a sugary dry rub, and he'll use like his flamethrower to brulee it on the outside.
I believe I saw a picture of that. Yeah. Was he using yours?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I knew it looked familiar.
But of course, I just like to use the fire coming off of the wood, right?
Right.
So that's just one of those things. And what's funny is when we were eating them for lunch, I actually commented, how weird is it that these things have a smoke ring on them? And, of course, you pointed out, Kevin, that, of course, they have a smoke ring. They were over the live fire. The live fire was producing a lot of smoke. Of course, they have a smoke ring. But you don't really think about it because they're out in the open air.
Right.
But again, coming back around to the fact that it's such a primal way to cook, I don't know. It's just there. It's such an odd way to cook for me right now. Like, I love it. I'm just trying to understand it better. You get what I'm saying?
I do. I don't know, just something about the taste of smoke.
The smoke and char. We always, honey, back me up. Do we always talk about the smoke and char?
Everything has to be infused with a little smoke and char.
With a little smoke and char, kid. That's what I'm talking about. And then that caramelization that you want on the outside from the sweet rub, from the brown sugar rub, you get that. Because that live fire, again, is just kissing the underside of the meat. And so when you're moving it around, when you're flipping it, in a smoker or a grill, in a grill, you might turn it once. In a smoker, you might not turn it at all. But over a live fire, you're constantly turning it.
Yeah, we turned those rib tips at least 3 or 4 times.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily. But it got a nice... I remember the last time that I was flipping them, even though it was pouring down rain outside, as I was pulling them off of the grill grate, it was these strings of sugar, almost not almost, but actually caramelized, and they were pulling, away from the grill, and that's how you knew you were going to get that incredible flavor of that thing that happens with sugar.
I believe you're referring to the Maillard reaction.
There you go. The Maillard reaction.
Yeah, the caramelization of carbohydrates.
If you want to say it truly in the French way, you need to add a little more time.
Maillard. The Maillard reaction.
Wait, Corianne has to head back inside. Honey, thank you.
You're welcome. It was good to stop by and say hi.
Thank you.
Love you.
Mwah. There's a kissing tax whenever we do this stuff, so I always have to make sure that I pay the toll.
Gross.
The children don't like it when we kiss in front of them. So, Kevin, that's how we kind of started your day, by the way.
Yeah.
The duck eggs, the fire-roasted bacon, the rib tips for lunch. We had some coleslaw that Corianne had made a couple of days ago. But honestly, the thing with coleslaw is even though the liquid starts coming out of the coleslaw because of the salt content, the flavors just meld so well.
That bacon in the coleslaw was game-changing, too.
I didn't even tell you there was bacon in the coleslaw.
You didn't need to tell me there was bacon in the coleslaw.
Fair, very fair, very fair. And, of course, some of our garden-raised squash. I forget what kind she called it. It's not delicata. It's something else.
Oh, the kabocha or kabocha squash. Yeah, they look like the giant pumpkin.
She was kind of scolding me for not eating the skin on that.
The pieces I had, the skin was pretty thin and tender. I was looking at the sections you were eating. The skin was a little bit thicker in your spot. Generally with a kabocha... So a kabocha squash is not perfectly round. You would lose a lot of the squash if you tried to peel the whole thing and get all of the peel off of it. So generally what I do, if roasting it like that, is just I'll take a peeler to it, but I won't be super anal about it. You just like scrape as much as you can off, like, quickly. But if you get a little bit of that skin left on, it's not the end of the world.
So hang on. Are you saying personally or professionally? Like, would you, if you owned your own restaurant, would you leave that on?
I would do the quick peel. Yeah, absolutely. But again, like, I like my food a little bit more rustic as well. I mean,
Sure.
If you go to a fine dining restaurant, they're serving kabocha squash, you better believe every single piece of peel is going to be removed. But for me, it's not that important. I like that, how would you say, like a Provençal style rustic cooking.
So I'm gonna throw this out there. I think that rustic style cooking is coming back, and I think that people are appreciating that a little bit more and more. Not necessarily, I'm not saying, potatoes with like a super hard skin, or you're roasting a beet and now you have to peel it yourself or something like that. But I just mean that rustic style where they're getting a few of those little almost imperfections. They're not exactly imperfections. They're planned imperfections, right?
Sure.
I feel like people are getting more into that with their cooking, especially with fine dining. People seem to be paying more money to get food that's cooked in a quote-unquote rustic or old-world style. Am I wrong?
I would not say you're wrong at all. That's 100% correct. There is absolutely a movement now, like going back to our roots as far as traditional cuisine goes, and getting away from like the ultra high processed stuff and just back to simplicity.
So if you were to open a restaurant right now and someone recommended to you doing like a, I don't know, live fire, what do you call it? It's not exactly an island, but where you can let people see exactly what you're cooking, especially when it comes to barbecue, especially when it comes to fire. A restaurant that had a live fire something where you were cooking in the center and people could see it. That seems like, depending on the area, folks might be more into than they used to be.
Oh, sure. People love to... I mean, I don't know if it's more into than they used to be just because I haven't been around for very long, but I mean, people love to see what's going on in all aspects of life, because it's something that they don't do. They want to watch it. It's like a show,
Well, instantly I'm thinking about David Sandusky, who's been on the show before. He has a restaurant called Beast Butchery. I'm trying to remember what his other restaurant's called. I'm going to mess up the name, and so I'm just going to leave it to imagination. But he does something very similar where he cooks out in the open. He's got a fire inside of his restaurant where he cooks. The Salt Lick is another one where they have that large live fire grill in the center. And famously, the Salt Lick doesn't even smoke their meat over that. They just take the meat from wherever they're smoking it and they throw it on that big live fire grill in the center. And people are attracted to that. People are drawn to that. People are drawn to that open fire. And I would argue that, again, going back to the whole primal caveman thing, there's something that's still ingrained inside of us that attracts us to the open fire when food is being cooked over it. That is, I don't know, a primal, instinctual trigger inside of us that says this food is going to be crazy good and I know it's going to taste good. The same thing happened with you. When you saw that I had the fire going in the Santa Maria grill, I felt like your eyes lit up. You were like, oh, we're going to be cooking over a direct fire today.
Yeah, we're doing some fun stuff. I was excited.
Because you haven't seen this grill before. I mean, I've cooked open pit stuff for you before, just over like fire pit and stuff.
I hadn't seen this grill in real life until today. I'd seen it over Facebook.
Right.
But that's it. And I was very excited to see it fired up when I got here.
Again, it's a food person, someone that knows food that comes and they see that. You have someone that's a trained chef coming over to somebody else's house that's not a trained chef, and they see that open fire and they go, oh, this is going to be something good. I think that there's something being triggered in the brain that's not modern. It goes back. Because realistically, Kevin, we've been cooking over open fires way, way, way longer than we have in ovens, electric, gas, whatever.
Yeah, we've been cooking over open fires since we've had open fire, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. A lot of people say that that's what separates us from the primate. That was the distinction between human and primate, was beginning to cook our food.
Sure. Yeah, I can't think of any other animal that really cooks their food. I know there's like certain ways animals prepare theirs, or
right.
You would call preparing it. Like there's vultures that'll like pick bones up and drop them onto the ground, or sea otters busting open clams and sea urchins and stuff like that. But yeah, nothing in the animal kingdom manipulates food like humans do.
Right, because they're doing that simply to access a certain part of the food. They're not doing it to improve the flavor.
Right. And we're as humans, like we're not satisfied with what we've been given. We've got to make it better.
And you as a chef, you're never satisfied with where your food is, right?
Because we're assholes.
Well, because you're always looking for a way to improve. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you're trying to do something specific and you're really trying to take it to the next level, I don't want to say make something that's better than everyone else's stuff. There is a certain aspect of that, but I'm just talking about you're always, again, coming back to the car thing, There's the estimated time of arrival. Some people see that more as a time to beat. Right?
By at least 2 minutes.
That's what I'm talking about. If you're taking a 2-hour trip and your GPS says it's going to take 2 hours, there are a lot of people, car person or not, and I know some of our listeners feel this way. You see that and you go, I know I can do better than that.
It's not a goal, it's a challenge.
Exactly. And so it's almost like the last time you cooked something, the taste and the flavor that you had the last time, you see it as a challenge to make it as good or better. Yes?
Yes, without a doubt. I mean, I don't know. I've always been told that the minute you stop trying to improve yourself is the minute you stop being a chef.
Right. Or stop improving yourself, period.
Yeah.
You can't really do that in life. The second that you get comfortable, all innovation, all you can really call innovation is an uncomfortable state. When you're uncomfortable, that is what brings about some kind of an improvement, right?
Yeah.
So whenever you stop and you think, I'm not making enough money, or I'm unhappy with my car, I'm unhappy with my house, I'm unhappy with the level of barbecue that I'm cooking, I'm unhappy with the way that I'm making a certain thing. Once you reach that point where you can say, I think I can do better with this, that's when you improve as a person. And it doesn't matter, we're going a little bit beyond the food. I know this is part of my fork, but when you start looking at your own weight, when you start looking at your own intellect, when you start looking at your own vocabulary, and you say, I'm not happy with where this is now, I want it to be more than what it is.
Or less, if we're talking about weight.
Or less. Or less. Yes. That's the mother of all invention. They say necessity is the mother of all invention, but in a lot of ways it's improvement, right?
Yeah, I mean, necessity is the mother of invention. That's absolute BS. We don't need, half the stuff we have we don't need. Do we need cars?
No. We don't need iPhones.
Yeah, I was about to say, do we need iPhones? Do we really need the internet? Like, do we need all this stuff? In a lot of ways, I feel like a lot of technology has made life, I don't know about worse, but definitely more complicated. But yeah, wanting to improve and make yourself better and make your life better, that's really, I believe, like you said, the mother of innovation.
I've watched it so many times. I'm sorry, guys. I know this is the food show, but going back to cars, since it's such a large part of my life, I have watched people that I know, people that I love, people who I consider close friends at a race event, and they've said, well, I've pushed as far as I possibly can. I know I can't go any faster. And then someone else in their same either class or with their same vehicle goes a little bit faster, and they go, wait a minute, maybe I haven't gone as fast as I can because this other person was able to go faster. And then they push it, and they do go faster. I've seen that so many times in the racing world, and I think we see it every single year in the food world. Why else would we have awards every year? Why else would the James Beard Foundation go out and look at all of the different restaurants? The Michelin stars go out and look at all of the different restaurants and award them in different ways. If we were doing exactly the same thing, we just had reached the pinnacle of what we were able to do. Why would there then be other people going out and looking at it? Okay, I have the perfect example. This past Friday, when I was talking to the Barbecue Ninja, he was talking about how he's old enough to remember when hot and fast became a thing, because hot and fast cooking is only 5 or 6 years old, okay?
Okay.
It was an entirely new way of thinking about barbecue. It had an entirely different flavor. You're adding more char. You're adding deeper, richer flavors to the way you're cooking. And it wasn't about whether it was better or worse. To a certain extent, it was just different. And a lot of the judges started looking at it and going, this is different, and I like it. And it started winning. Okay?
Okay.
You get where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
Food has a lot of that left in it. We're always pushing the boundaries. We're always moving in a direction. And even though a lot of these, not necessarily fad, I don't want to call them fad, but this movement back to where we used to be, it can never go back to where it used to be, okay? We feel like it's a back step, but it's really not. If you stop and you think about it, we can't go back to the caveman style cooking. Even if they call it caveman cooking, you're still doing it on a drum smoker. You're still doing it on a custom-built barbecue trailer, okay?
Right.
We're doing it in very different ways. Even the charcoal that we use, the wood that we use, it's different. You're picking up different flavors. You're using it in different ways. Look at all the different woods that we use just to cook with. And beyond that, I think we can look at the alcohol realm, because they break all of those woods down into their different categories. They don't white oak, post oak, Oregon oak, Garyana. It all has such a different flavor, and they use them in such a different way. I'm thinking back to the Ardbeg episode that I did with Brendan McCarran, and he was talking about how they will change the flavors of their scotch with different types of wood that they use, different barrels that they use. There really isn't anything keeping us from doing the same thing with barbecue or with food in general, right?
Right. I mean, there's always going to be something different to do. There's always going to be something new that somebody hasn't done. There's just too much stuff and too many people to not continue to figure out new ways to do stuff. And not all those ways are going to be good.
Sure.
But we're not going to find out until we try them.
Right.
So that's really the only option, is to just try them.
I think the one thing that I don't want to do is smoke my meat with peat.
Ugh. God. No. Please, no.
It's not a unknown.
I have to try some of this scotch tonight then, right? Like,
maybe.
I have to at least take a taste.
We'll see. I've got plenty of other stuff for you to try.
Yeah, I want to know. It's been about 4 or 5 years since I've had a real peaty scotch. And I still remember very vividly what it tastes like. It was Lafroig. I don't know if you've had Lafroig before.
Well, Lafroig is a very interesting flavor.
Interesting's one way to put it.
Well, I'm throwing it out there. As a matter of fact, would you grab the bottle of Benedictine out of there?
Yes.
So I'm drinking right now Bushmills Red Bush. And Bushmills, of course, there's just the straight up Red Bush, or excuse me, the Bushmills. We're drinking the Red Bush, which is aged in a bourbon barrel. There's also the Black Bush, which is in sherry casks. Sherry casks are very popular for Scotch, as a matter of fact, and known for being a very, very intense flavor, by the way. So if a Scotch is aged in a sherry cask, let's pretend you're doing a tasting of 5 Scotches. The sherry cask is going to be towards the back. Okay, because it's an intense flavor, right? So you just have certain things like that where certain flavor profiles are coming through in certain ways. And do they taste good? Do they taste bad? You know, Kevin, I've known a couple of people now who have never liked beers or whiskeys. They're just not a fan. They thought that they hated all of them. And then they tried scotches, and specifically heavily peat-smoked scotches, and they just love them. And it just goes to show how different our palates can be.
I don't know how anybody can like peat-smoked scotch, honestly. I find that flavor just so overwhelming. Especially someone that doesn't appreciate beer.
I agree.
Or whiskey in general. Like, It's like, I don't like whiskey, but I do like this medicinal, like, punch you in the face with a peat stick, like, I mean, it's a funny concept to me.
And actually, it's funny you say that, because even Brendan McCarran was talking about how Ardbeg Scotch in particular, it has a very antiseptic, medicinal flavor to it. And some people like that, some people don't. Every year they do a specific Ardbeg Day Scotch, okay? And you'll never have the same Scotch twice when you have an Ardbeg Day. That's why it's so expensive. That's why it's so exclusive. This year was the Ardbeg Drum, and it was finished in, I think it was Dominican rum casks. But
interesting.
In the past, they've done scotches that were finished over kelp and seaweed, and they had a lot of that salty sea flavor.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's just, it's different. I have a hard time saying that it's wrong, because everybody's palate is different. Sometimes something just tickles your fancy. It's like, well, it's like fetishes, quite frankly. People have certain tendencies that they lean towards.
Yeah, and others may not,
Sure.
or not even just may not enjoy, but may be repulsed by, like I am repulsed by peat-smoked scotch.
Exactly. Some people are into it.
Yeah.
Not everybody is, but some people are. And there's a large enough following that there are undoubtedly, undeniably, people who are into it, and they just can't really wrap their heads around anything else, right?
Yeah, definitely seen some people get stuck on certain things. It's like, no, this is all I like. This is all I'm into. This is the only thing that does it for me.
Well, when it comes to booze, that's called alcoholism.
Right.
I don't think that's a good rule of thumb. You probably can't say I'm not an alcoholic because I'll drink anything.
I'll at least try anything.
Well, we just opened a bottle of Benedictine Brewery St. Gabriel 1.0 Double. And I had the good fortune of stopping by that brewery. I was in Silverton, Oregon, and I stopped, Mount Angel, Oregon.
Ah, it's Oktoberfest out there right now.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I swung by the, what do I call it? It's the old Trigger Barn, still owned by Joe and Brian Trigger. And they're partnering with Pit Boss and Louisiana Grills, Dancin' right now. And they are creating some incredible grills. If you haven't seen any of their stuff, we have it posted on our social media at Pardon My Fork on Facebook and Instagram. But I was able to walk over to the Benedictine Brewery, try a couple other things. Really, really good stuff over there. I really have not tried a whole lot of their stuff, but I took a bottle home of this double.
God, this is like drinking chocolate.
Is it good?
Oh,
I haven't
man.
tasted it yet.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I'm smoking a cigar here that's been in my humidor for the last 4 years, but I'm trying to smell this a little bit. It's actually quite fruity on the nose.
It is. It's deceiving, Andy.
I'm smelling a little bit of like orange peel and fig on the nose, just sniffing it out of the glass. It's a beautiful color. It's dark in color. It's got a little bit of a tan orangish head.
Yeah, it's nice dark caramel. Mm-hmm. It is a beautiful, beautiful beer.
You can't see through it. It's hazy. It's not dark per se, but it's got a nice brown color to it. And this is this is a good beer. Holy smokes.
Right?
Very rich, very malt forward. It has a fruity backbone. Honestly, there's a lot of, and I don't mean in a citrus way. I mean like a chocolate-covered orange.
Yeah, like you're getting those aromatics, like those oils. Yeah, no, I'm getting that as well. But it's so nice. Like, for me, I mostly get chocolate. Like, it's very like you said, chocolate orange. But there's definitely some nice aromatic in there as well to kind of give it a little bit of depth. It's not just super rich.
You know what's funny is that the chocolate can be deceiving even for me, because a couple of days ago I had Rogue Double Chocolate Stout on draft. I brought home a growler of it, not a bottle of it. And I feel like it tastes different in a growler out of the tap than it does from a bottle. But this is not that chocolate forward as heavily as that was, but it was also, the Rogue Double Chocolate Stout is 72 IBU. This can't be that. It doesn't have the bitterness.
No, it's got to be like less than 50. 46.
I'm just looking on the bottle. It doesn't actually say what the IBU is on the bottle, but just tasting it, it has to be below 50. Because it's not bitter at all. It's not like it's overwhelmingly sweet, but it's quite mild for being a double.
This is a double?
It is. Well, it's not an American double.
Okay.
It's
the German.
It's a Belgian Dubbel.
Dubbel, German, Belgian.
How do you say that, Chef? Is it Dubbel?
I don't speak Belgian. Or French. I guess they speak French in Belgium, right? Yeah, no, this is fantastic.
It's very, very good. It's the only bottle that they were selling at Oktoberfest.
I mean, shoot, it's still like 6%. I mean, 5.9.
Yeah. It's an
Doesn't
average
taste
beer.
like it.
No, not at all. It's a very easy drinking beer. This is definitely one of those ones where it's bolder than the alcohol content would say for me.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, I think is good, because really no brown or dark ale is going to be sessionable per se.
Tell that to Ruben.
What even is sessionable?
I don't know what qualifies as sessionable.
I hear that so often. People
Session
call something...
ale.
Yeah. People call things sessionable. And it's like...
Anything's sessionable if you're an alcoholic, Andy.
You know what? That's a good point.
It's like any pizza's a personal pizza if you're sad enough.
I don't know about sad enough. Any pizza's personal if you're hungry enough. How's that?
I don't know. I get hungry when I get sad.
Sad or stoned. That's when you get hungry, right?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's been the hardest part of the keto diet. It's like, what do you eat when you get the munchies? Found out I can't even eat that many carrots. Carrots have too much natural sugar in them.
Yeah. It's a starch. You got a lot of carbs coming from that way.
It's really disappointing.
We're obviously not keto this weekend.
No, today definitely. I knew I was coming out to see you. I knew I was going to have to get myself back into ketosis. I don't care. I mean, I'd been going on it for Well, let's be real. I cheated a couple of times this week already. Some jerk came to the shop last week. You know, this guy rolls up in a new Mercedes S-Class, right? It's like, I don't want to touch your car. Get out of here. You know, go to the dealer. What are you doing here? And so the guy just needs air in his tires. I was like, okay, you know, whatever. Mm-hmm. And he's like, sorry, I'm just getting air and I'm not getting anything from you guys, but I brought you something. And he pulls out this bag from Bales Market across the street, and it's just like got 12 gigantic cream puffs in it. It's like, you son of a bitch. How dare you? I can't imagine what must have gone through this guy's head, because like he hands me these cream puffs and I just looked at him like I was so pissed off. It's like, I don't think he's ever, like, that's not the reaction he was expecting, you know?
Yeah, but it's the reaction he deserves.
Damn right.
All right, hey, we got to wrap this up. Let's continue on with our cook today. We've been all over the place, but we did the rib tips, the riblets.
Yeah, we had bacon, eggs, rib tips.
And so the rib tips you were happy with. They weren't exactly like fall apart because we didn't do them on the smoker. We just did them over the live fire.
No, and they were still very tender. I mean, I had no problem getting the meat off the bone. It was not an issue. I don't think I've needed a toothpick all day, honestly.
And rib tips are one of those things where you would think that they'd be really sinewy, especially going over the live fire. But there's something about, because they're live fire cooked, they render down a little more, or
yeah. And I mean, we still cooked them for like what, close to an hour.
At least an hour, yeah.
Yeah. You know, maybe a little over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mac from Bomax Barbecue, he was here the other day with his son, and I cooked them rib tips, and, you know, they turned out fantastic. Rib tips are one of those things that I love to cook, and even though you're not really breaking them down in the same way that you would anticipate them being broke down, they still were just, I don't know, they were winners. And then we had baby back ribs on. I don't normally do baby back ribs. You know this, Kevin. I
know you're a St. Louis guy.
I kind of am. I don't need the extra meat is the thing. Because I'm not looking to be full from the meat. I'm looking for that flavor, right? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, baby back ribs are like it's the Cadillac of ribs, right? Like it's or the filet mignon of ribs. It's the most tender. They're what most people would call the best. But yeah, man, I like the texture of a St. Louis better. They're a little more meaty, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
They're consistent is what they are.
Yeah.
So we finished those baby backs. Those were incredible. 4 hours over smoke. I did them hot and fast. I've been trying to get more into the hot and fast because for a competition style, that's a little bit more, I don't want to say easier, but you'll get them to the judges more consistently than you will doing a 6 or 7 hour.
And that's the first time I've ever had hot and fast smoke on baby
backs.
Yeah, absolutely. And for real, like, still had a nice smoke ring, still had great smoke flavor to them. Like 4 hours was enough. I was pleasantly surprised.
Wow.
Yeah, when I saw you had the smoker rolling at 275, I was like, oh. It's like, okay. But, didn't want to judge.
Really?
Yeah.
No. Here we're recording. So talk to me. Tell me. Were you? I mean, obviously you weren't judging me, but did you have thoughts, feelings? Did you look at that?
I had qualms. I mean, like 220 to 230 is generally like the known like right formula for just about anything. Brisket,
sure,
pork, shoulder, ribs, whatever.
We ran as high as 300 today.
I know, and I was. I was apprehensive. But, again, I trust you. I figured this wasn't your first rodeo. I figured you wouldn't just, like, shoot from the hip while I was around.
Oh, yeah. No. I've done this a few times.
Not to, like, stroke my own ego or anything, but I know you wouldn't want to make bad food for me.
No. Well, I don't want to make bad food for any of my friends. As a matter of fact, the baby backs were for my nephew's birthday. He turned 19 this past week. He asked me for baby backs on his birthday, but then It was a crazy day. Like we did so much for his birthday. Ran into one of the other towns, had dinner, met with my parents, his grandparents. I mean, it was a crazy day, and we just couldn't get to the baby backs. And I promised him some for this weekend.
Well, we all know Sundays are for smoking meats.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So he could wait a day.
But you really, I mean, were you a little...
I was kind of thrown off. Yeah, it was $2.75. I was like, that's hot. That is hot. That is really hot.
And we didn't wrap or anything. No butter over the top. I did spritzes. At about the 2-hour mark, I started opening the smoker every half an hour and spritzing with apple cider vinegar.
Yeah, which is fantastic. I mean, I would do that hot and fast or low and slow. Like either way, I do love that little vinegar hit. I mean... Pork in general is just such a rich, fatty meat. Like that little bit of acid really helps brighten everything up and cut through that fat. But yeah, man, I mean, those ribs were phenomenal, and we got them 2 hours faster than we would have if I had made them. So, I mean, I really can't complain.
This is also true. Did you feel like you had a surprise? Because I didn't get to see your face when you tried them. Honestly, I came back out because I said, you guys go ahead and slice the ribs. We took them off of the smoker after 4 hours. We wrapped them for, like you said, about an hour. And then I asked you guys to go ahead and cut them for me while I came out and added more wood to the fire because we had to finish the shoulder. So I didn't get to see your face when you tried them for the first time.
Well, I'll tell you what. I knew they were going to be good before I even put it in my mouth because I watched your wife, Corianne, eat one. And I saw the bone when she was done and how it, everything just pulled off the bone anyway. Like,
right.
It was like, that was really the only thing I was worried about was texture going that quick.
Okay, but not pulled like you're not just
no, they
releasing.
They were not overcooked at all. It wasn't It wasn't like twisting the bone out of a braised short rib or anything like that. Like the meat definitely still had some texture to it, which I thought was nice.
Right.
Because like you order baby back ribs at any like we were talking about earlier, like a Chili's or any other, like barbecue chain or whatever. And like you can absolutely sit there and pull the bones out of the rack without, so much as more than a little twist. And the meat is, although flavorful, lacks texture. And that hot and fast smoke, I mean, seems... I hate to say it, but I think that's going to be the way that I start doing my ribs from now on.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know if I would do shoulder the same way.
Sure.
Like shoulder is still, low and slow. I'd like to do I like to do shoulders at like 220 to 230 for about 12 hours. But again, the whole time management aspect was intriguing and enlightening.
Actually, that's a good point. We haven't tried the shoulder yet. You had a little bit of the skin off of the shoulder because I tried something new where I just scored the skin like 1 inch checkerboard score. And are you feeling apprehensive about the pork shoulder, or now that you've had the ribs, are you feeling pretty good about it?
No, I'm sure the shoulder's going to be just fine. I mean, we got it up to 195. Like, and, it'll be great.
Yeah. There's more leeway there than the ribs. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's a bigger piece of meat.
Sure.
Yeah, there's always a little bit more room.
And then, of course, we'll still have a couple other things to cook. I'm sure you're going to see photos on Facebook.com/PardonMyFork and the Instagram @PardonMyFork of the New York strips. I'm still going to make Chef Kevin cook those for me because I haven't cooked a steak in forever, so I'm going to have him tackle those.
Oh, it's going to be fun.
But keep an eye out for those. It's going to be a lot of fun. The whole thing is going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to go ahead and cut it here. I want to thank you guys for joining us. I want to thank Chef Kevin Getline for jumping in on this. Kevin, you're still going to be doing some food stuff. I know you're kind of taking a little bit of a hiatus from it, but we're going to get you back involved. He's going to be doing some events with me and some catering stuff with me, and so we're going to get him back involved because obviously you heard him talk. He has to get back in the food world.
I always end up coming back. I've taken a couple of breaks in my life, but I always end up back in the kitchen.
That's right. All right, you guys, thank you so much for listening. Check us out, pardonmyfork.com. You're going to hear all of the shows that we've been talking about, all the guests that I've been talking about, the social media. I've said it a couple of times, but, at Pardon My Fork is pretty much where you're going to find us on Facebook and Instagram, so check us out. Kevin, your stuff is Chef Crispy Northwest.
It's Chef Crispy PNW.
PNW. Go ahead and follow him on Instagram and Facebook. He's got a lot of cool stuff going on. Lots of car stuff, lots of food stuff. So go ahead and check that out. Thanks so much, you guys. And for Kevin, this is Andy. We will See you next time.